Good afternoon, everyone from the Caribbean. My name is Avi Martínez-Roman, co-founder, co-director of Right to Democracy. Right to Democracy is a nonprofit organization that is working to confront the colonial framework that affects the 5 territories of the United States. Yes, my people, Puerto Rico is one of the territories, but there are 4 more. We are talking about Virgin Islands, the Mariana Islands in the north, with Guam, which is a part of the Marianas Archipelago, and American Samoa, the archipelago of American Samoa. And we are very excited today because we are going to talk about something today that truly caused furor throughout the whole world. And it was Bad Bunny's presentation in the Super Bowl. As we can see, we have people connecting from all parts of the world because we have people from all the territories. It's 4:30 p.m. here in the Caribbean, and it's 6:30 a.m. in the Pacific. They live in the future. So let's start, and I will present my colleagues to you. These are friends of mine who are with us today, and we are going to talk about the halftime. And I will allow them each to speak. I have Dr. Hugo Vieira Vargas, who is a dear friend, has been for many years now. And Hugo is professor and also is one of the best guireros that I know. And sorry, Marcia. Hugo, if you want to describe yourself, tell me about your work, how it relates to Bad Bunny, and who are you? Hello, my name is Hugo Vieira Vargas. I am a professor here in Albizu University. I work in other universities in the country, and I have that duality. I am a college professor with a doctorate in Latin American history. I work with music and in the Caribbean and investigation, but I also have been a plenero for many years, and I've worked with various groups, including my great friend Emmanuel Santana. And music, as I see it, has that duality. It's a phenomenon that is social, cultural, it's music. And my way to approach Bad Bunny is to look at it as a popular movement. What is music popular? How do we look at popular music? And his proposal, his aesthetic and social proposal. And that's where I'm going. And so I hope to have a great conversation today. Thank you, Hugo. I will now pass the mic to the Caribbean beauty, Dr. Maya Sherwood-Droz, who I have close ties with because we graduated from Princeton University and we saw each other. And we also had the tour through Arecibo together. We traveled together. And so, Maya, great to have you here. Who are you and how do you relate to Bad Bunny's work? Hello, thank you for the invitation and a warm greeting to all the participants today and everyone who is in our audience. My background is in linguistics. I work mainly in lexicography, which means the creation of dictionaries, and my main interest has always been Puerto Rican Spanish. Also, the relationship among tongues and ideologies, languages and ideologies. In 2024, I started to work on a dictionary of current and living Puerto Rican spoken word based on the lyrics of popular music of our current language and using those lyrics as a body of study to extract the language, current language. And in that context, the Debí Tirar Más Foto album comes out in January 2025. And so I redirect my study because I realize that it's an important inflection point. And I think, this album deserves its own dictionary. And so I did that project in 2025, which is called the ABC of DTMF, a dictionary of Puerto Rican words and cultural references that we find in De Vita Mira una Foto. So I wanted to, one hand, I wanted to document that lexicon and those references, but I also wanted to provide a tool that would open it up to other audiences, to understand what this experience means. And last thing, now I just created an English version, the ABCs, because it turns out in English you say it in plural, the ABCs of DTMF. And this also the interest here is to provide access, right? It's not to substitute the English over Spanish and close it out, but rather to value our Spanish, but give access to any person who's interested in the Puerto Rican experience as it's reflected in Bad Bunny's work, so that they can also access that. I love the work you're doing, Maya, because we're always listening. Oh, we don't understand what Bad Bunny is saying. Bad Bunny is just saying gibberish. Ladies and gentlemen, each place in the Caribbean has its own way of speaking. And it's a mix of Spanish with many other cultural things. And Maya explains that very well in her dictionary. And for those who say they don't understand, there you can understand it with a lot more depth. So thank you for that work, Maya. And last but not least, and definitely not least important, we have the great plenero and cultural worker, Mr. Emmanuel Santana. Emmanuel, please present yourself. Hi, family. My name is Emmanuel Santana. I'm really happy to be here with Adri, a friend of many years. We are conspiring to make a better country, and we always meet in those spaces. And so it's a luxury to share my vision and my experience with my brother, Dr. Hugo Viera, who plays better Guido, but I'm more fun than he is. And also with Dr. Sherwood, who for me, it's a pleasure to be here with. And my experience in relation to the Debí Tirar Más Foto album is that I was part of the recording in that production. I was a part of the Tiny Desk concert, and I also participated in the residency that Bad Bunny did here in Puerto Rico. And recently I recorded some audios that were shared in the Super Bowl. Again, basically, that's my where I am at, and also I'm sitting here in Casa de la Plena Titomato, where we want to have the most amount of information regarding Plena and cultural music to give it context as well. I love it. As you said, we're the sandunga to the world, where the flavor comes, where flavor unloads itself from Puerto Rico to the world. Yes, thank you very much, Emma. I want to start by giving a little bit of spice to this conversation. I want to start by asking your opinions about the importance of Bad Bunny and what he did in the Super Bowl within our current context. And in order to stimulate this conversation, I'm going to ask Paola if she could kindly play for us the first clip of when this Bad Bunny's presentation begins.
Qué rico es el latino. ¡Hoy se ve!
It's the fact that just in the opening shot of the Super Bowl show, to see that green, which at first just looked like long grass. And I remember, Maya, when I went to Princeton to go live for long periods of time, and I went through that first winter, I was having dreams of running through grass, because I guess I missed the green so much that I had dreams of running through long grass areas like a gazelle. And I don't mean to romanticize the pastizal, the long grass, or what it means, because it gives it's that pasture land refers us to cane fields and a colonial context of when the United States came to Puerto Rico and took hold of a lot of farmland that originally were smaller farms that they turned into huge, vast farms to create sugarcane fields. And we had slavery in those fields. And also after that, we had, even after slavery was abolished, there was peons working there, Puerto Ricans, even including my grandfather when he was young, who after, because sugar cane was so harsh, he started selling carbon. He would go to La Plaza Arecibo and sell carbon. It was it's very close to me. And also the context of how he, from the very beginning, puts this in the context of those extractive economies, because there's an extraction of our bodies, of our lands, of our resources, and how he starts with that from the very beginning. And for me, it was very important that all the territories identified with that, because this existed in all the territories, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know who wants to comment on what that was like for you, that Bad Bunny presentation. Did it mean something to you? That context of what we are living as a colonized territory of the United States. Okay, I'll start. I think there's various registers to look at. There's a visual register, which obviously places us beyond the pasture land. It alludes to a sugarcane fields, and that also alludes to our Caribbean reality and the close ties that we have with the Caribbean reality, which, even though it is diverse, there are certain elements that unite us in experience. And that experience within the sugarcane field is not a good experience. People really had to work hard there. And so that is a statement that Bad Bunny does with that opening. On the other hand, there's a musical register. Hoy se bebe, today we drink. That was from Tony Santo, who's a Dominican bachatero. And there's also sugarcane realities in the Dominican Republic and all Caribbean. And the first chords that you hear are chords of a bachata arpeggio guitar. So when you hear it at first, Bad Bunny has always played with that. He's fused styles of music. And so that very first beginning, for me, and in order to understand what I'm saying, I understand that visually it puts us in the mindset of workers. And like you say, extraction economies that came to Puerto Rico to just exploit their human and natural resources, the land and the people that were here. But that's not just the Americans. It came before that. It intensified with the US and land theft. And on the other hand, it also, he didn't decide to place a cotton field, right? Because the reading we are doing is a Puerto Rican reading of this, at least my own. If I had been in Alabama and I had been a Black man in Alabama, then maybe it would make more sense for me to see it from the viewpoint of a cotton field, which would be very similar. But I'm looking at it from Puerto Rico, from the Puerto Rican experience, which is not the same as seeing it from the Puerto Rican experience in the United States, which is another register to that. But we just started with that, so I'll let my colleagues speak as well, what their thoughts are. Very well said, Hugo. And I think that for the audience should know that there was also that type of sugarcane field in the Pacific, because sugar became a very powerful industry along with the cotton. Two very powerful industries. Maya. I'm going to look at it from the perspective of language. For me, that opening, those first few words are said in Spanish. It's so good to be Latino. And there we see a solidification of what was announced 4 months ago, and we had been talking about this is going to be sung and spoken in Spanish as a way of percolating that in the American psyche. And so those first few words in Spanish really reaffirm that. And then to say how delicious it is to be Latino, I think that also connects me to a type of work that he is trying to do through this, which is that even though these artistic projects have a Puerto Rican heart, it really is an embrace to all America, which is also a very interesting linguistic thing, which is the rescue of the word America. He used it in the Grammys, and here it was more official because, as we well know, the United States had appropriated the term of America in its totality. It has reduced America to itself, and now we are starting to rescue once again the true value of the meaning of the word America. And he does that when he says, "God bless America," starting with Chile and all the way to Canada. The other thing that I found really interesting in the opening is when they put that screen and they say the halftime spectacle, the Super Bowl halftime spectacle, where he translates the word Super Bowl in Spanish, which is not used. And so I see a kind of humor there that I don't know how to explain it, but supertazón, I had heard that from the Fundación de Español Urgente, and they sometimes recommend using that instead of Super Bowl. And I thought it was a bit ridiculous, to be honest. But then to see him use it there, I think there's something kind of cheeky in naming it fully in Spanish when truly nobody would call it supertazón. I found it really funny and a little bit, provocative in a cute, cheeky way. I liked it too, Maya, because it reminded me, when you got that from Spain, you thought that was ridiculous. Just like when I went to Spain and they started to say bacon instead of tocineta, but it's a word, Becon, bacon. I thought, oh, how in certain countries like Spain, everything is translated to Spanish, becomes Spanish. And now we, with this super tazón, it's something that we wouldn't do. We would say the Super Bowl. I think it's very curious and interesting. And I would like that you highlighted that cheekiness of how he did that. Cheekiness and a bit more, because I think there's something, I'm sorry, there's intentionality, correct. The truth is, we'll see it as we look at this. There's a subversion here of what the linguistic hegemony of English has been for the last 200 years. There's a real challenge and subversion to that domination. And the last thing, in fact, the name, because the name is the name, and to take the name and translate it completely to Spanish, And something else that he's highlighted our colleagues in the Pacific, because they admire that we still have our Spanish and that we have been able to preserve it. But that's not our first indigenous language, right? We have a double colonization. The first one was from Spain and then the United States. And so it results in an unfortunate loss of our Arahuaco indigenous Taino language. So now we're struggling with this new identity, protecting our language and trying to conserve it. So let's go to the music. Let's go to the music and Sandunga. Someone who was in there, tell us Emma, what does it mean for you, this moment and the participation of Bad Bunny in the Super Bowl? From your perspective, I have to clarify that I wasn't in the Super Tazón. No, I know. I did collaborate in the production of the album. I think that our colleagues spoke about the fact that we identify those first few notes that you hear from the guitar, I felt that I was in my native Santurce in Parada 2022 with some old man screaming from a balcony, "Hoy se bebe." Very Caribbean feel. So he established from the get-go, this is how we're going to play it. And he invoked the Latino community, which I think started from the moment he used those white chairs with us. He was playing with an aesthetic that really invoked our collective pride in the fact that we come from a working class race that has been submitted to many injustices, but even within that, we find joy, and that will always be our rebellion. And so I think he alludes to that immediately with his music and the way it starts very easily, and then quite quickly it becomes it hypes up. Titi me preguntó, and it's full speed ahead after that. And I think you can perceive it in the dancers and everything that was happening in the beginning. Had you imagined that Plena would reach the levels it has? Well, I will be very honest. Sometimes I think I'm living in a simulation because it's so many people that died in anonymity so that something like this could be happening today, that I think it's an immense privilege that I am here to witness it. I feel super fortunate, and I recognize the privilege I have and also the responsibility it represents. The responsibility of saying how we got here today. And with the opportunity that I'm having in Casa de la Plena, that is part of the work I try to do here. I wanted to add to that, to what Emma was saying. It's interesting because, things align and common forces come together. What Bad Bunny did with the Plena, and Emma has participated many years, as well as I have, in that space, even though there are other larger spaces. Bad Bunny or his team, Emma could tell us, there was a decision to take an acoustic small group of the circuit, which I call the Chinchoreo Plena circuit, which is a living circuit where people play in groceries and little bars, but it's a circuit that has fed the Plena greatly. Beyond Plena Libre and Plenea, which are very important groups in the work they've done. But Bad Bunny didn't go, from what I saw, didn't go to Plenealo and translate to the show. He said, let's get these young guys who are doing their own thing and who can represent many other groups that are playing and have been playing for many years. And so that was a very acute sensibility that he had to say, no, it's not Plena Libre that I want. I want that Plena that, gets played in every street corner. Hugo, Emma can't comment that because otherwise he'll get in trouble. He'll get scolded. No, no, no. My full love to Pena Libre and Plenealo and all the groups. Nothing, don't worry. They know that my labor for my country is the reason I do this. The commercial aspect to be secondary always. And what Hugo says is very to the point. The fact of choosing pleneros, smaller of a quartet, a smaller plenero group, but he also did it with the salsa number. He didn't get a big, huge band. He went to the music conservatory and he recruited students and talent there. And he seeked out these talents from places that are not usual in gaining such a wide audience. So I want to say to the public, please feel free to write in the chat or in the question and answer anything that you might want to hear from us, any questions you might have. As you can see, this is a dynamic conversation among friends. And so take advantage of us and ask us anything you like. Let's go now and go into more detail into the presentation. I want to know, what is the moment, like your favorite moment, that you would like to highlight from the presentation, and why? Who wants to go first? I'm going to change the order. Emma, you go first. My favorite moment, it's hard to choose. My favorite moment was when Lo que pasó a Hawaii started with the Cuatro single played by Eduardo Santana, who I send all my love and respect and gratitude for representing us in such a dignified manner in this production with the rabbit. And then suddenly Ricky Martin starts singing Lo que le pasó a Hawaii, a song which is a critique, in my opinion, the most powerful critique within his artistic proposal to colonialism, a cultural reaffirmation, which is very strong, and to have chosen the #1 viewed event in the United States to denounce this, even as we are a United States colony. I think that you have to be very courageous to do that. And I think in relation to that, he did various things that were very courageous, but I really have to highlight that Ricky Martin was one of the people who opened the road. Without Ricky Martin, there's no Bad Bunny. That's what I genuinely think. And to have given that space for Ricky Martin to sing that song of his, I don't want them to do to you what happened to Hawaii, such a powerful critique. It made me choose that above seeing dozens of colleagues listing their panderos, when in our country, at some point, because of playing plena, people would be put in jail, citizens of our country, when panderos sometimes were broken on people's heads, when currently, even as we're having this conversation, in the municipio of San Juan, the leadership of Carmen Yulín started to treat plena on the street as unnecessary noise. And currently that still breaks with the public order code. The San Juan mayor has not amended this. I cannot go into the street to play pena without fearing reprisals from the police when I'm actually doing a cultural affirmation. So under all that repression, which for us to suddenly lift up our drums in unison in Guasabara, which was an important way, but I'll definitely stick with Lo que le pasó a Hawaii. Wow, Emma, I was not aware that it was that street plena was considered unnecessary noise. That obviously allows for any neighbor to call and accuse and report. I didn't know that. When I talk to many people in the different territories and in the United States in particular, there's no awareness of the existence of the territories and of the relationship between the territories and Hawaii. When the United States made the political decision of expanding beyond its geographic lines outward towards the sea, they don't know that in 4 months, warships arrived to American Samoa, to Guam, to Hawaii in the Pacific, to the Philippines, these 4 places in the Pacific, and to Puerto Rico and Cuba in the Caribbean. So it was a massive deployment of warships in the space of 4 months, and the Hispano-American Cuban War happens. Then we have the Treaty of Paris, But then they keep Cuba and Puerto Rico, but then they get Hawaii and American Samoa. And with Hawaii, they decide to incorporate it to their political body of the United States. But Puerto Rico, Guam, and Philippines, they refer to them as non-incorporated territories. Hawaii then goes on to become a state in pretty quickly because commercial interests were already working there and they had large communities of white people there. But the rest of the territories, under the decisions of the United States in the insular cases, it was decided that because they were inhabited by savages, aliens who were not capable, so literal were not capable of participating in the government in the United States, they could not be incorporated. And that without even exploring the question of whether we were interested or not interested in having relationships with the United States. People don't know those historical relations and how Hawaii becomes a state, the other territories are as non-incorporated states, and this opens the door so that today Benito can in the Grammys say, we are not savages, we are no aliens. And I say, wow, Benito has been doing his homework. He has learned something that he has realized all these historical things. Hugo Maya, what is the most interesting part of the Supertazón, of the Super Bowl? Maya, okay. I have something I want to comment to what you said and Emmanuel said. Okay, I'm going to say this, which is thanks to this representation and the reach that he has, we can't underestimate the educational value that this has to the public in general in the United States. About on the subject of Puerto Rico, there is education, or at least an opening of awareness, and now everybody knows that Puerto Ricans have American citizenship, and they also perceive that it's a situation, that anomalous situation. And I think that we can't really underestimate the value of that massive popular education with this huge exposition that he has done, and what all the things that could provoke in that country. You know, in the case of a resolution of status, North American citizenship needs to be more aware of what is Puerto Rico, and I think there's been an important exposition in this. And going to the show, I will focus once again on the linguistic aspect. I really liked that at a certain moment, at least in the transmission as I saw it, there was a great board that would put the lyrics of the songs in Spanish. And many of those words are Puerto Rican words. And I can give you some data about the album. I did an analysis of the totality of the vocabulary used. 25% is Puerto Rican Spanish, Puerto Rican words or words with Puerto Rican meaning. So it's a significant percentage, which makes the decoding of that a challenge for many people who speak Spanish and much more people who only speak English. So I just wanted to highlight something that we all know, which is a part of the value of Benito's figure when it comes to the linguistics, which is that from the very beginning, he has sung in Puerto Rican Spanish, and it is Puerto Rican Spanish of his generation as well. And he has not only sung, but also spoken. He has occupied. And when it comes to singing, we have okay, hold on, let me say it like this. Reggaeton, trap, urban genre, singers and musicians use our Spanish, right? But in the Bad Bunny's case, it becomes very relevant as he amplifies his international reach and starts to penetrate in the US market. Because in the past, what we had were the famous crossovers. which, as Emmanuel said, are the ones that set the groundwork for this to happen now. But the Latin American or Hispanic artists had to adapt themselves to the English-speaking market. They had to adapt and start singing in English or more pop to be able to enter into that market. Here, no, there was a very clear posture from the beginning and very explicitly stated, no, papi, no, I'm not going to sing in English. And another thing is the matter of the interviews, not just singing, but speaking. The fact that he would be in interviews in media, English-speaking media spaces, occupying the space in Spanish. Like there's an English space and he would occupy it in Spanish and, and make that statement. And I'm sorry for using the metaphor of territorial invasion, but it's a bit like that. He would like occupy that space in Spanish. Yeah, the president of the United States gets furious. They're very furious and they want to take legal measures and because they see it as an invasion. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, they see it as an invasion and something that I have perceived. And Jorel Melendez in an interview this week said the US market is shifting to adapt itself to Bad Bunny. And I perceive it linguistically. Last year, even though he would go to the interviews, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, and Saturday Night Live, and would speak in Spanish, and the people there would more or less respond. I think that last year it was a bit more like looking at him like, like a bit of a curious, oh, this artist, okay, let's interact in Spanish. Now in 2026, a year later, what I perceive is a normalization of sorts of having an interview in English and have this person speaking in Spanish and the interviewer starts to interact. I don't know. I see it like it's normal, more normal now. There's a normalization of a communication dynamic that is multilinguistic, multicultural. We have Trevor Noah in the Grammys who started to sing Spanish there. The interview of the Super Bowl, the interviewers at one point were saying tranquilo, tranquilo. And in the Super Bowl, wow, the biggest sporting event in the United States and quite iconic in the United States, and it's happened. There's this event in Spanish, so I think that somehow that power dynamic has shifted or is shifting from a linguistic perspective, and not to substitute one language with the other, but to rather to make space to the languages and look at language as bridges to communication. And from a musical aspect, you can speak to that. But Lady Gaga, even though she didn't speak in Spanish, she adapted her music to salsa. So that adjustment, yeah. And many interesting cases, many interesting things about what you have said. First off, I think that there's an acknowledgement from the interviewers like Trevor Noah, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, who interviewed him and he spoke Spanish as well, that to know many languages is a good thing, that it doesn't make you less, it makes you more, it makes you smarter. It makes you more as a person, as a culture. It's not a loss of something, it's a gain of something. And so it brings me to the other territories like St. Thomas, where English is so different from the English that is spoken in the United States because they have their own words, their own dialects, a strong accent in the Pacific, where they are in the Marianas, where they're doing a lot of efforts to rescue their Chamorro language, the Carolinian language, which is also spoken in the Northern Mariana Islands. And hello, I don't know if Betances is watching us from Guam. There's a man from Guam called Betances who started a cultural institute in Guam with his wife, his chamorra wife. Betance is de Mayagüez, is from Mayagüez, and he's in Guam for many years. And this matter of rescuing our language because they add to us, they not not less. Even after it was prohibited there, just like in Puerto Rico, there was a time when they prohibited, just like in Puerto Rico, they prohibited speaking Spanish, and over there they prohibited chamorro. They couldn't speak it, they would be arrested, and now they're trying to rescue it. And the people from Samoa who have been able to preserve their Samoan language and are the ones who have had the most opportunity to preserve the language. But I think that, and I don't want to dominate the conversation, but for example, there are Mexicans. We grew up watching Mexican television. Who of us did not grow up with El Chavo del Ocho? Our Spanish has a lot of Mexican. When I go to Mexico City, I feel very at home because we grew up with Mexican television. We watched the Mexican telenovelas. We go to the United States, and as you say, Maya, our artists had to adjust to English, but also when they spoke Spanish, they had to clean it up so that it would be a more vernacular Spanish. I think that's what it was called. And so usually it meant a more Mexican Spanish, or even in Mexico, they would cut off their accent to make it cleaner. And so I think that I'm going to share my favorite part. Mexicans from the United States should not feel that because the Puerto Rican Spanish got into the Super Bowl, it doesn't represent them. On the contrary, he goes in with a Puerto Rican Spanish, but he comes in to denounce and acknowledge the concept of Latinhood, but also acknowledge the reality of the Latino in the United States. When he gives the Grammy to, this is my favorite moment, when he gives the Grammy to the little boy who's watching him on TV, everyone thought that the kid was El Conejo, Eliam Conejo, who had been arrested. Why? Because aside from the fact that he looks like him, it's a reality that's being lived in the United States, and which is a very brutal reality that Latinos are experiencing in the United States. And so I think that we have to acknowledge that brotherhood, that regardless of that difference in our accents or words, it doesn't make us less but more as people and as humanity. Hugo, I don't want to, I wanted to add to what Maya was saying, because I asked myself the same question. What has happened on a social and global level that there's more of a opening to Spanish? Obviously, the courage of Bad Bunny, who said, I speak Spanish, and that, I mean, I would do it too when I was with my students, but it's not the same as having the platform he has. I think that also indicates a globalization process. On the one hand, we talk about how culture will be erased, but at the same time, there is a reaffirmation of the local. However, that doesn't deny the power relationships that existed in language and in these certain countries. And so language continued to be the de facto language, the language that was used to communicate within the platforms and whatnot. And Bad Bunny, and I think this is a phenomenon that will keep repeating itself. I was watching an interview with Raúl Alejandro, who's another urban artist of Puerto Rico, who speaks his English, but it's an English he learned here in Puerto Rico, just like us, which is, I mean, some people speak both fine, but my generation who don't speak that much English, so we speak it clumsily, our pronunciation is different, or I have less vocabulary to say what I want to say. So they interviewed Alejandro in Apple, and he used phrases in Spanish, and the interviewer either understood him or had to somehow contextualize what was said and continue the interview, which is what Bad Bunny is doing. So there's this phenomenon of local reaffirmation and the acceptance of the local within these dynamics, which continue to be power dynamics. On the other hand, you were talking about, I want to say what there's a reading that is about reason and another one about feeling. The denouncement of colonialism is very present in a very subtle manner in that presentation. And to give that responsibility to Bad Bunny in terms of the ties that might exist with other territories that we are aware exist, it would be to speculate what is his intention in terms of that denouncement. But I do think that there is a responsibility in that representation because of the territories. Puerto Rico is one of the territories with more population and more presence in the United States, a historic presence with established communities in New York, Orlando, and other parts. And after I lived 15 years in the United States, and I to them was Mexican because of the way I look. And so you become brown people, and all of that has a charge when you go. You get off the plane, suddenly you're brown black people, and you're like, what is this about? Because in Puerto Rico, it's different. We have the racial continuity. So to visualize it, to make it visible in the matter of the territories, because you're bringing it now and tying it into what we're saying. But we saw in Puerto Rico, we have a lot of lack of knowledge about other non-incorporated territories that exist under the United States. We don't talk about it here. We throw a stone, and I don't know if it includes the Virgin Islands within the territories of the United States. But we have communities in Puerto Rican communities in Santa Cruz. We have with them cultural and historical ties, and we don't mention anything about that. There's also, following this, what impressed me from the performance, obviously the denouncement when the Apagón song in particular, because those of us who lived here, we experienced it. Many people who have lived in other places where there are natural disasters maybe were able to identify themselves. Of course, I think that 13 minutes is too hard for contextualization. You see those electric grid, and people said there was the three crosses and Christ and Barabbas. I don't know. Some people do an interesting reading. I'll respect that. But truly, if you know the true context, it's harder. So when it comes to the one that really hit home, it hit to my heart, when Ricky Martin came, I got very emotional. My heart, I felt it in my heart. First, because Ricky Martin is Puerto Rican, but Ricky Martin is not a representative, but he is openly of the LGBTQ community in the last few years, and he was invisible. He was made invisible, and he knows it. And publicly, we saw that. And so the fact that he sang that song, which ties us to Hawaii, and maybe for a generation like mine, for which Ricky Martin was so important, not just because of Ricky Martin, but because of Menudo and Ricky Martin. And we say there's no Bad Bunny without Ricky Martin, but without the distribution channels of streaming or whatnot, Menudo would fill stadiums in Brazil, which is one of the harder countries to fill stadiums. And also that child that they lifted from the chair, because how many parties did we go where I slept on the chair? Yeah, I really love that part. But there's an interesting tension, if you allow me, or should we go on to the next thing? Go on, but I want to react to something you said, which is very important. And it's that matter of there's an element when he hands the Grammy to the child. Beautiful. Really hit my heart. But it's also the narrative of the meritocracy. It's the narrative of if you make the effort, work hard, you're going to achieve it. And that part tends to invisibilize the subject of structural issues, but it also talks about structural problems. So there's a tension within the performance itself. I don't know if I'm extending this reading, but well, when one of the most important messages, which is when he gets close to the camera, where he says, believe in yourself, something like that. Believe in yourself, which is they say, always say to us, I say, yeah, believe in me, but who am I in this society? Am I Black? Am I white? Am I poor? Am I homosexual? And so all of those components and dimensions of the human being are inserted in a structure that tends to make it difficult. I don't want to be negative. Obviously, it's important to see the effort that's important, but meritocracy really drills it into your head to the point where it invisibilizes the structural issues that complicate our lives or make it more difficult. Yes, of course. And I understand you, Hugo, your observation, and I share it with you to a certain degree. But at the same time, it's like you say, there's that, but there's also the other thing, acknowledging our cultural values. And so when you say Puerto Rico is the biggest territory, yes, that is a fact. Puerto Rico is the territory with 3.2 million people. The other territories have 0.4 together, 400,000 people. The fact that we're so many and we're so loud and we've gotten so far gives us a certain responsibility, Hugo. That's what I always say. Like you said, Virgin Islands is right next to us. But who knew of us who are here? I didn't know it before I worked with Right to Democracy. Who knew that in the Virgin Islands they have the same electrical grid problem that we have in Puerto Rico and are considering privatizing their electric grid? And I'm over here going, no, 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 don't do it. We are living through the same hurricanes. For them to get help, it has to go through Puerto Rico first. They feel completely ignored by us because we do ignore them. And at the same time, there is a day in October which is called Virgin Island and Puerto Rico Friendship Day. We didn't even know that. Instead of Dia de la Raza, there's Puerto Rico and Virgin Island Friendship Day, and we should be celebrating that. What I'm saying is, for you to say that we can, it's like the rah, 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 like this thing of we can. I think it's also a necessary energy, not just for Puerto Ricans, but for all of our people who have been invisibilized and reduced so that they can say, I've gotten to a point, I have a responsibility. I get to this point and I have a responsibility with my brother and sister, my colleague, who are going through the same things as I am. And to Right to Democracy, it's a priority. How do we, and through the cross-territorial coalition, how do we visibilize these relationships that we have, not just with the people in the Caribbean and the Virgin Islands, but also the people in Guam and in the American Samoa and North Americans in the Pacific? Because I must say, I got texts from people who felt, why didn't you include our flags at the end? Because they wanted to be there, because they feel identified, because they feel that they are a part of this story, because they see it, and because we don't know about it, aside from the message of America meant America, right? To reclaim that word. I don't, I have a question or a concern. The work of Bad Bunny is also based on, they could criticize in a nationalism that could be criticized as banal, but I don't know how that nationalism translates, that cultural nationalism, let's call it that, how it translates to the other territories, and if in these other territories are there movements of cultural affirmation, but not just cultural affirmation, that's the difference, of national affirmation, because we are, my reading from Puerto Rico, we are not celebrating a culture that belongs to a bigger space in continental America, but we are celebrating a culture that is different and asks for self-determination. And also we have to talk about how that translates, that cultural affirmation which a Chicano might have. But cultural affirmation of a Chicano in San Francisco is not the same as the national affirmation that we have had historically here on the island. So it's complex because obviously we have such a close relationship with the United States, and we can't lose sight of that there are millions of Puerto Rican people in the United States. It's not about defining Puerto Rican or being Puerto Rican, but talking about the struggle that we've had here, and I'm not sure how that translates to other spaces. I don't know if you want to go to another subject. I think that there is a lot to talk about and a lot of us learning about the cultures of the different territories of the United States. There's a lot to talk about. I wanted to go back to give the opportunity to people to answer the questions. I saw here that there's a question asking what we think of Lady Gaga in the halftime, if anybody has any thoughts on that. If we have a day of friendship with the territories, no, we don't have one, Annalie. We have to create it. We should create it. But what do we think of Lady Gaga in the halftime show? Who wants to answer that question? Should I be honest? This is a conversation among friends. Anybody else? Emmanuel, Maya, I can also say something. In terms, emotionally speaking, she sings, she's a very good singer, but you know, I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel, it didn't provoke much in me because I think it was used strategically to appeal to a US audience. She sang in English, she's a white woman, North American. There have been criticisms about her maybe inclination towards Zionism, but I'm not sure if that's how much of that is speculation. But I thought that it was entertaining, but truly you could take, I mean, from my point of view, you could take out the Lady Gaga participation with the salsa, and it doesn't take anything away from the performance. It was a lovely element, but you know, neither up nor down, neither this or that. Maya, Manuel, anything else? I liked it. I thought that it was conciliatory. I think that it was a way of establishing something that is very important, which is that I think that his posture has been, I got no beef with the US people. He's saying, I have a different opinion from what we have been told that we are sufficiently valuable. And that's always been his posture. And we see it as radical because in such a huge platform as he has, we've never had someone who has been so emphatic on that. I think Lady Gaga is one of the most talented artists that the US has. She has always worked a bit with irreverence. And so for her to cross into that Latin flavor I think speaks to her saying we can come closer to that just as they can come closer to us, and in the end we're just the human race. And so I think that it breaks down a bit those frontiers and unites us. I mean, that's my position. I share his position. I got no beef with the US people. I mean, with their leaders and their military, they have a mortal enemy in me, but with the people themselves. If anything, if I can accuse them of anything is ignorance, maybe, just like my people sometimes. I think that one of the strongest tools that colonialism has is the lack of education. Once people get educated, get informed, they get empowered and they start changing things. And that is why I participate in things like this, truly. Emmanuel, I really appreciate your words because you have said something key, which is the trick that colonialism plays on us. The trick that colonialism has is ignorance, but it's also a way of setting us against each other, and provoking toxic relationships. In Right to Democracy, we promote the self-determination subject from a non-ideological and party position, because we think that each person gets to choose how that relationship is within their own political processes, how that relationship with the United States should be. And so we don't promote any particular final solution to that process. So in that regard, I have found that in these conversations, having educating, and through education, being able to get different people from us become our allies, is really powerful, because the matter of imperialism, racism, democracy, extraction don't affect only Puerto Ricans. It's something that affects people throughout not just the territories, but in many communities in the United States itself. And so when we educate, when we speak about, and when we include, we can cross barriers where that toxicity is eliminated a bit, and we can start working these themes from common space. So I appreciate that you say what you said, because the Puerto Rican, be it pro-statehood or independence, the Puerto Rican who loves Puerto Rico has that desire to move Puerto Rico forward and have our electrical system work and have people have basic human rights. And Lady Gaga, in that regard, Hugo, can appeal to a population that looks at that moment and says, wow, she's also there. She understands. She's included. I think that's my opinion. And what I find intelligent of including a personality like her, who is an ally to what Bad Bunny is trying to do and who supports him and has been there, and have it be a part of a strategy. It's already 5:38. Okay, we're going to go to the last question and I want you to share with our public. Now what? We had this great moment. What do you expect? Where can people learn more? Those of us want to keep talking about these things. What is your advice? I'm going to pass it to you, Maya, because I haven't let you speak for a while. I think I think that people who are interested are invited to, and there's plenty of information. There's a lot of information, and they can access it in various ways and at various levels, different perspectives. I want to take this question to focus it on what is the call to action? What is the proposal here? All of this happened. We created this intense emotional moment representing Puerto Rico. All of these shared emotions by so many of us that were captured in that album and in that residency. Beautiful emotions like that ineffable love that we feel towards our country. Also, the acknowledgement and the respect and the gratitude for those who came before, that gaze towards our grandparents and parents, the love of friends, and also at the same time, all of those difficult feelings from displacement and immigration. So that moment is created aside from the historical and social political context of that. So what is the proposal? For me, the proposal lays in the actions that Bad Bunny has and his group have taken in these productions. And so I'm referring to, first off, the really owning our identity. And that's it, as an individual and as a collective. This is me, this is how I speak. That's for starters. Second, to be creative in whatever we do individually, to be creative, because from that creative space, the Bad Bunny himself, what rules this action? A political education agenda or a creative action? I think the creative then evolves into that. And so it's our turn to be creative in whatever it is we do. And number three, collaborate. Collaboration now of not institutional, because we're also in a context of the dissolution of our traditional institutions. And so it's like we have to meet again in our networks. And I saw that in the album as well and in the residency. You recorded it not in Sona Music, you recorded it in Rio Piedras, in Pasillo Sonoro. You brought all these musical groups, young groups, these let's rise together. I'm not gonna go up and leave you behind. We're all gonna rise together. The intergenerational bridge that we also saw, the figure of Jacobo Morales, who's 90 years old. We also have a network and a collaborations intergenerationally speaking. Gilbertito, Ernita, and all the ones that he invited. So that's where I see an invitation to extended to all of us. And from there, I think that some people, some might take on the political and educational action, and some might take other roles, You have mentioned such important intersectionalities, especially educationally. And for me, I was touched by the generational one, because when I saw there was a video of Ricky Martin hugging Bad Bunny and saying to him, Boricua, thank you, I love you. And I am Ricky Martin generation. I think everyone in this panel is Ricky Martin generation. No, Emma, you're not younger. Don't pretend. When he did that, I felt like I was embracing all of these greats that are young people who have this energy to do things differently. These young people, and yeah, it's like Boricua, I love you. It's like I'm this new generation, which by breaking schemes with things that have had us stuck, lack of education, the break in intergenerational connection, the creativity and art as an important social field that is being recovered, and also just the daring. I think you're right. And I'm going to let Emma speak now, but I also wanted to highlight that this aspect of us not just learning. If you could see yesterday, I was in Texas presenting in front of the American Bar Association a motion, a resolution, so that the American Bar Association reject the unilateral imposition of the deep floor mining in the Pacific. And this could happen in Puerto Rico, just like they're imposing militarization here. And when I mentioned Bad Bunny, because I said, why is a Boricua here speaking to you about this when this affects the Pacific territories? Did you see the Bad Bunny show? And everyone, wow. And I was like stupefied because it wasn't just a moment of internal recognition of the Puerto Rican identity, but it's also a moment of recognition for U.S. people of all races and cultures who see themselves reflected in that message. And it's a moment of learning and of reckoning for a bunch of people beyond us as a culture and how special it has been for us. Hugo, I'm going to let Emma speak because I want him to tell us what's next, and then I'll pass it to you so you can close out and we'll finish the conversation. I'm going to be as brief as possible. My most important teacher, Ramon Luis Lopez Rivera, Ramon Lopez, would say to me that the plena is a reaction or an answer, an artistic musical answer to the US invasion, the military invasion to our country. I think that what Bad Bunny did by closing with a bunch of people lifting their banderos and playing plena to Debí Tirar Más Foto, a song that evokes a lot of feeling. I saw this in 31 shows we did, people just bawling their eyes out as they heard this song. And so that speaks to the strength of the collective and how acknowledging ourselves as a powerful Latin America, a Latin America that can for itself is very important. I also want to add that we have been a colony for centuries, first of Spain and then the United States. And even then we can have conversations like today. It's because our justice is on our side. They have had all the resources to make us feel relegated, and they have not been able. The resistance is alive. I think it is a reaffirmation that that is a fact, and that each person from wherever they are here. I got my pandero. You have the academy, and so even the person selling limber from their balcony, each person can continue to aspire to a better country, not just for Puerto Rico, but for all the territories, all the colonized territories, which I acknowledge is very discriminatory. And so I hope that this motivates us to keep fighting. I love your words, Emma, and you evoke the concept of human dignity. Human dignity, which is reflected and which reaches the heart of all the people who feel in those words and feel identified. And I have to say that in all of Latin America and in all of the territories, the displacement, seeing people leave, having people have to leave to be able to have a dignified life, and all of that, everything that migration involves and everything that we are living through right now in Puerto Rico, in the territories, and in the United States, with that anti-immigration movement, as if that were not a reality that is integral to the existence of the United States as a nation. In a moment where they're going to celebrate 250 years of them becoming independent of Great Britain, precisely because they were migrating from there. It's very significant, right? That concept of human dignity that is not silent. So thank you, Emma, for bringing that. Hugo, I'll leave it to you. What's the next thing? I'm going to be brief as well. First, I want to acknowledge a comment from one of my students, Steven Rodriguez. We don't have time to go into it right now. Thank you, Steven. We'll talk about it in the classroom. I want to synthesize a bit. There is a double effect here. On the one hand, what Emmanuel is saying, the sense of the collective is very important for any action. If the powerful have the state, we have each other. And that effect that Bad Bunny has through his entertainment gives us that space, that glue. Protest music has always existed. Puerto Rico, Latin America, and all parts of the world, there has been protest music. Music with social awareness, but they have not always created this effect or created this feeling of we can and this unity. And on the other hand, going to what you were saying, Ali, the acknowledgement of our existence. And that acknowledgement of our existence, together with that coming together, is devastating, because the possibility of what you were saying with the American Bar Association making a statement or motion, and maybe 5 years ago, they might have known, okay, she's Puerto Rican, she's a lawyer. There's a social placement there. But Bad Bunny has been able, him and others have been, obviously he's not the only voice here, but he's the lead voice. They have made it possible for us to have a larger acknowledgement from the North American culture. I mean, they knew of our existence, but how harmful was it for so long? The perceptions that they had of Latinos and Puerto Ricans with the movies and the stereotypes and all that type of thing. So in that regard, I wanted to bring that forth, that the education that is given in hand in hand with an acknowledgement. So it's an interesting give and take that could somehow at least be more, confrontational in this situation. I love how you characterize it as that it places us. It puts us in a context where we were not seen before, oftentimes. Never. I think it has been a process that began with the Irma and Maria hurricanes, where suddenly they discovered that Puerto Rico existed, and it has become subject matter that has continued to grow. And with Bad Bunny, it kind of exploded in a way that we couldn't imagine. It places us. And with that, and if there's no other questions, I think it locates us in a historical and specific context of the United States. In Right to Democracy, and we've worked for self-determination of people. On a local level in Puerto Rico here, but also from a perspective in the United States, and interterritorial and cross-territorial. It was hard to make a US person understand, who also had their own issues and work, and help them understand our reality. And so suddenly, 2 years on, with that context, that huge context that they are living in the United States, with a government that is oppressing their own in a very strong and obvious way, which goes against the human dignity of many people there. There is an opportunity, I see, and we're as well, my colleague, we see an opportunity to say what you are living through right now there, we have been living it for more than 500 years, which is the unilateral governance that is imposed in a violent and extractive manner that violates the human rights of people. So this is a time to talk. It's a time that it's a very important time to analyze. And this is why we have given this value to Bad Bunny's work. And I would love to be able to continue communicating with him and his team, if possible, to be able to talk more about the value of this work, because his work is in a very strong historical context where the United States itself is questioning those same consent values, consent of the governed, are we the same? And they are questioning it at a time when they are celebrating 250 years of existence. And it is being questioned with the help of a Puerto Rican. We could not believe how the right to democracy work, which is to promote an acknowledgement in the United States of the existence of the colonies, and that should not be like that, and that it needs to change. That is our aim. How can we provoke that conversation so that there is a political commitment to that change to our relationship with the United States? How this has been multiplied thanks to an artistic work. Maya, like you said, is still an artistic work of a boy from Vega Baja who started as a bagger in a store and who now is #1 in all the world. And so what comes next? I can't wait. I want to be a part of it and continue these conversations with all of you. Like you say, Emma, from the Boricua, from the Escuela de la Plena Tito Mato to the colleges and universities, the plazas, and have these conversations from a perspective of the things that unite us to defend Puerto Rican dignity and also human beings, people of all the territories of the United States and of the United States itself, which is struggling and suffering. It's a historical moment, and we have to defend dignity. So thank you, everyone. I don't know if you want to do anything else. We have a question. We have a question in the chat. We have a time to see the question in the chat. What does it say? El reconocimiento les pone en un riesgo mayor de explotación. The question in Spanish is if to be seen and to be acknowledged puts us in more risk of exploitation. My simple answer is no. I think that exploitation happens when when we try to hide it, when it is hidden, when nobody knows about it. That is where this biggest exploitation happens. Because like Paulo Freire said, authoritarianism and oppression is dehumanizing in both ways. It dehumanizes the exploited, but it also dehumanizes the exploiter. And both the exploited and the exploiter have to educate themselves to be able to break with that dehumanization, which affects both lives. Paulo Freire, one of my favorite authors, because he writes from the perspective of the oppressed, a political philosophy that has inspired me and inspires the work we do in Right to Democracy. And it is saying that if we are going to promote humanity, we have to push with love. We have to push, like Bad Bunny closed out the concert as if he as if he read Paulo Freire, saying there's nothing more powerful than love. I'm sorry. And love is loud. It is also small, but love is potent, powerful. It's loud. No, I don't think so. I don't think that for us to be acknowledged and seen will make us in more danger because we were already in danger. Like the generation says, they took so much from us, they even took away our fear. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that to close out. Well, look how punctual we are. And Emma can go teach his class in the Tito Mato school. And thank you to everyone, friends who have been here with us today. This is recorded. Share it. There will be an English version as well. And I hope to see you in Puerto Rico. Invite me to a beer. Invite me to a plenazo. Don't forget about me, even though I travel a lot. I live in Puerto Rico. I love you a lot. Big hugs. Hugo, thank you for bringing your students. Maya, thank you for your knowledge and defending our Boricua Spanish. I love that, Emma. I know you know I love you. Big hug to everyone. Bye. Bye-bye.